Her father spoke of her as ruined goods, a burden now, a shame on their name. He didn't look at her, not truly, as the rough-hewn wagon rumbled to a halt on the edge of the sprawling lumber camp. Clara, or what remained of her, knew the truth of his words in the hollowness of her belly, the phantom ache where her legs had once been. The accident had taken more than her limbs. It had stripped her of her place, her future, everything she had once been. Despair, a bitter taste, clung to her tongue. She was unwanted, a stark reality that had settled deep into her bones, colder than the mountain winds. Her father, a man hardened by seasons of frost and thankless soil, had found a solution, one that grated against the last sliver of her dignity. He had spoken to the lumberjack, Elias Thorne, a solitary man known for his quiet strength and little else. Elias had seen the offer, Clara suspected, not as a transaction for a bride, but for a needed hand, a body to warm a desolate cabin, a grim sort of kindness, perhaps, or merely practicality. The men of the camp, burly and shadowed, watched from a distance, their gazes a heavy weight of pity and speculation. She felt the shame, like a cloak, thick and suffocating. Her gaze, unfaltering despite the tremor in her heart, met Elias's. His eyes, the color of deep forest moss, held no judgment, only a vast, almost aching loneliness. He did not offer comfort, only a stark, simple question. "You willing to come with me, ma'am, to my cabin?" It wasn't a demand, but an invitation, startling in its unexpected respect. She felt a flicker of something she hadn't known she possessed, the capacity for choice even in this absolute surrender. The sun, a pale, indifferent orb, began its slow descent, painting the western sky in hues of resignation and a fleeting, fragile hope. The air thrummed with unspoken things. This was the precipice. Before we get into this tale, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And subscribe if you want more content like this one. She simply nodded. A single, decisive movement. Her voice, thin and dry, was trapped somewhere in her throat. Elias, without another word, lifted her with practiced ease, his hands surprisingly gentle beneath her ruined body. The rough fabric of his coat scratched her cheek as he carried her, not as a fragile doll, but with a certain sturdy care. The wagon, laden with her father's unspoken relief, rumbled away, leaving her utterly alone with this quiet, unknown man. The journey to his cabin was a silent affair. The only sounds the crunch of pine needles under his heavy boots, and the distant, mournful cry of a hawk. Clara kept her gaze fixed on the dense forest, the ancient, silent trees that seemed to stretch endlessly towards a sky-bleeding twilight. She felt the uncertainty of her situation like a living thing, a cold knot in her stomach. What kind of life awaited her with a man who bought a wife as one might acquire a tool? Her mind raced, a frantic squirrel trying to outrun the coming winter. She was a burden. She knew it. Every breath she took, every moment she existed, was a testament to her unworthiness. Elias said little, his silence a constant, sometimes comforting, sometimes unsettling presence. He didn't offer false reassurances, didn't pretend their arrangement was anything other than what it was, a desperate solution for two desperate souls. He moved with a quiet competence, his movements economical and strong, the product of a life spent wrestling with the untamed wilderness. She studied his profile, rugged and unyielding, etched with lines that spoke of solitude. A curious tenderness flickered within her, not for him, not yet, but for the stark reality of her own existence. She had survived. Even this, the cabin, when they finally reached it, was a simple structure of rough-hewn logs, nestled deep within a clearing. A plume of smoke curled lazily from its stone chimney, a beacon of warmth in the encroaching chill. It looked less like a home and more like a solitary outpost against the relentless tide of the wilderness. He carried her inside, the scent of wood smoke and pine immediately filling her senses, a stark contrast to the musty odor of the wagon. The hearth, a low glow of embers, cast dancing shadows on the walls. She felt the profound shift in her life, a sudden, irreversible turn, yet strangely, a flicker of something new began to stir within her, a faint ember of curious observation that slowly began to push back the encroaching cold. The first few days in Elias's cabin blurred into a quiet rhythm of observation and unspoken needs. The cabin, stark and simple, soon revealed a surprising warmth. A small, carefully tended garden patch lay outside, despite the approaching chill, testament to a desire for something more than mere survival. Elias was a creature of habit, rising with the first blush of dawn, returning late in the evening, his axe a steady pulse in the distance. He left water, firewood, and simple meals within her reach, anticipating her limitations without drawing attention to them. This quiet attentiveness was a form of kindness she had rarely encountered, a stark contrast to the pity or revulsion she had grown accustomed to. She watched him, sometimes through the small, grimy window pane, as he worked, his movements fluid and strong. He rarely spoke, but his presence filled the small space, a quiet, reassuring anchor in her turbulent world. Her initial suspicion began to recede, replaced by a tentative curiosity. He wasn't like her father, who saw only a burden. He saw something else. She couldn't quite name it. One evening, as the fire crackled in the hearth, chasing the shadows into the corners of the room, Elias sat on a stool across from her, whittling a piece of cedar. The scent of the wood was crisp and clean. He looked up, his gaze steady. "You ain't eaten much today, Clara," he said, his voice a low rumble. It wasn't a question, but an observation, devoid of judgment. She felt a flush rise to her cheeks. Shame still pricked at her, the fear of being inadequate, of being a drain. But then she saw the subtle concern in his eyes, a depth she hadn't anticipated. I ain't hungry, Elias," she mumbled, the lie tasting sour. He merely nodded, then placed the unfinished carving beside her. It was a small, crudely shaped bird, its wings slightly askew. "Thought you might like it," he said, and returned to his whittling. It was a small gesture, almost imperceptible, yet it bloomed in the quiet of the cabin like a rare, unexpected flower. It was the first gift she had received in years that wasn't a necessity, but something simply given. In that moment, a tiny crack appeared in the fortress she had built around her heart, allowing a sliver of that quiet kindness to slip inside. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of their life settled into a quiet, almost domestic hum. Clara found her own ways to contribute, mending Elias's worn clothes with nimble fingers, preparing simple meals from the supplies he brought back from town. She learned to navigate the cabin on her own, developing a newfound independence within her limitations. The bird Elias had carved sat on the small, rough-hewn table, a constant reminder of his unspoken attentiveness. One blustery afternoon, a sudden, violent storm trapped them inside. The wind howled like a hungry wolf, and the rain lashed against the cabin walls. The usual sounds of the forest were swallowed by the fury. In the flickering firelight, a rare vulnerability slipped into the air between them. Clara, emboldened by the shared isolation, found herself speaking. "My ma," she used to say, "I was a wild thing, always climbing, always running." Her voice was soft, laced with a distant memory. "Then the tree. It took me." She recounted the accident, the horror, the agonizing weeks that followed, her voice trembling. The pain of it, the raw shame of her family's subsequent abandonment, spilled out, a flood of pent-up sorrow. Elias listened, his face a shadowed mask, his gaze fixed on the churning embers. He didn't interrupt, didn't offer platitudes. When she finished, the silence hung heavy, broken only by the storm's relentless assault. "They told me, they said I was a burden," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "that I was broken." Elias stirred, turning to face her fully. His eyes, usually so guarded, held a deep, profound sadness. "Clara," he said, his voice rough, "you ain't broken. Your body's changed, but your spirit ain't. Never was." He paused, searching for the right words. "We all got scars, Clara. Some you see, some you don't. Don't mean we ain't whole." He then spoke of his own past, a life lived in solitary defiance, of a family he had lost to illness, of the bitter loneliness that had driven him deep into the woods. He spoke of the quiet ache that had settled in his heart, a yearning for connection he had long buried. In the flickering light, Clara saw his own wounds, his own vulnerabilities. Their shared confessions forged a new, fragile bond, a deeper understanding that transcended the simple transaction that had brought them together. For the first time, she felt truly seen, not as a broken thing, but as a person, with a past, with pain, but also with an undeniable resilience. The storm raged outside, but inside, a new kind of quiet began to settle, warmed by the embers of burgeoning trust. As the weeks bled into months, the cabin ceased to be merely a shelter and transformed into a sanctuary, a true home. Elias continued his work, but his solitary existence began to open up, allowing Clara to fill the empty spaces. She learned to mend his worn boots, to prepare hearty stews, to keep the fire stoked. She found a quiet purpose in these small acts, a sense of contributing, of being useful, that slowly began to chip away at the ingrained belief that she was a burden. The forest, once a symbol of her isolation, now seemed a protective embrace. Its vastness spoke of endurance, of roots running deep. Their connection, forged in shared vulnerabilities, deepened with each passing day. It was not a passionate love, not in the way stories were told, but a quiet, profound belonging, a recognition of two lonely souls finding solace in each other's presence. They were a family, not by blood, but by choice, and by the slow, steady accumulation of shared moments. One particularly frigid morning, Elias returned from town with an unexpected addition. Cradled in his arms was a small, shivering bundle, a child, no older than 4 or 5, with wide, frightened eyes. Found him by the general store, Elias explained, his voice softer than Clara had ever heard it. Orphaned, folks said he was a nuisance. Nobody wanted him. The boy, named Finn, was thin and wary, his small frame a testament to neglect. Clara's heart ached with an immediate, fierce protectiveness. She saw herself in his desperate eyes, in the unspoken plea for safety and acceptance. Finn's initial fear slowly thawed under Clara's gentle patience and Elias's quiet strength. Clara, who had known the sting of being unwanted, knew how to offer the solace of unconditional acceptance. She taught him stories, sang him lullabies, and showed him how to mend his small, torn shirt. Finn, in turn, offered a boundless, uncritical affection. He saw Clara not as a woman with missing legs, but as the kindest person he had ever known, his mama. His innocent gaze was a mirror, reflecting back to Clara her own inherent worth, reinforcing that she was not broken, that she was capable of profound love. With Finn's arrival, the cabin felt complete. The quiet conversations between Elias and Clara now included shared laughter, the clatter of a child's toy, the small, constant presence of a new life blooming under their care. They were a family, whole and true, their roots entwined, deeper than any tree in the surrounding woods. Their quiet sanctuary, however, did not go unnoticed. The small logging town, a scattering of cabins, and a general store just a few miles downriver, had always harbored a suspicion for those who chose a solitary life. Elias, with his reclusive nature and formidable strength, had always been an object of wary respect. Now, with Clarath, limbless woman, and an unacknowledged orphan under his roof, that wariness curdled into open judgment. The first signs were subtle. The storekeeper's eyes lingering too long, the sudden quiet when Elias entered the saloon, the way women on the dusty street would pull their children closer. Then came the whispers, carried on the wind like bitter seeds. Unnatural, they muttered. A man living with a ruined woman, and that child, likely stolen or worse. Clara felt the familiar chill of public shame creep back into her heart, a venomous echo of her past. She heard them speak of her as if she were a wild animal, and of Elias as a fool, misguided by his lonely heart. The church ladies, their faces stern and righteous, made their first official call. They came to the cabin, armed with scripture and veiled accusations. "This ain't proper, Elias Thorne," Sister Agnes declared, her voice sharp as a winter branch. "A woman like her, outside the Lord's blessing, and a child with no proper kin. This ain't a Christian home." Elias stood tall, his presence filling the doorway, a solid barrier against their intrusion. "This is my home, sister," he said, his voice low but firm, "and these are my kin." His loyalty, unwavering, was a shield. But their visit planted a seed of fear. The retention devices were at play. The foreshadowed community judgment had arrived, and with it the threat to their newfound belonging. Clara felt the rising moral tension. Was their freedom, their small, self-made family, worth the constant battle against a world that refused to understand? She worried for Finn, for the innocent child caught in the crosshairs of adult prejudice. The sheriff, a man named Brody, who usually turned a blind eye to the goings-on in the woods, made an unscheduled visit, his gaze sweeping over Clara, then Finn, with an unsettling scrutiny. "Heard tell you got yourself a family, Elias," he drawled, his hand resting casually on the butt of his pistol. "Folks are asking questions about the boy, about the woman." The external threat was no longer a whisper, but a palpable presence, threatening to tear their fragile peace apart, leaving Clara to wonder if she would be abandoned once more, proving herself to be the burden she always feared. The sheriff's visit was a chilling prelude to the escalating threat. A week later, a small but determined group from town, led by Sister Agnes and a few other prominent, self-righteous men, gathered outside their clearing. The air crackled with hostility. They were not a mob in the traditional sense, but their righteousness made them just as dangerous. Their goal was clear: to rescue Finn from what they perceived as a sinful, irregular household, and to correct Elias's unnatural arrangement. "The boy needs a proper upbringing," Sister Agnes cried, her voice carrying across the clearing. "He needs the guidance of the Lord, not this." Her gaze flickered to Clara, heavy with condemnation. Elias stood outside the cabin, Finn clutching his leg, while Clara sat just inside the open doorway, her heart a drum against her ribs. Her earlier fears resurfaced, bitter and potent. Was she truly a curse, a burden that would always invite trouble? She almost spoke, almost told Elias to let them take Finn, to let her go, to sacrifice their fragile peace for their safety. But then she looked at Elias, his jaw set, his eyes fixed on the intruders. His loyalty was an unyielding force. He would not abandon them. "You ain't stepping foot on my land," Elias stated, his voice low and dangerous, not a single tremor. "This boy stays here. This woman stays here. We're family." The tension was thick, a living thing. One of the men, a lumber foreman known for his quick temper, stepped forward, his hand flexing at his side. "You're living against God's law, Thorne, defying the whole community." Elias merely tightened his grip on Finn's small hand. "God's law or man's law, ain't none of it gives you the right to break up a home." Clara saw the struggle in Elias's eyes, the quiet battle he was fighting within himself. He could lose his standing, his livelihood, maybe even his life, standing against these people. Her shame at being the cause of his suffering was almost unbearable. She considered the awful choice: flee, remove herself as the problem, save them. But then Finn looked up at her, his innocent eyes full of unshakable trust. In that moment, she knew she could not leave. She would not let fear turn her into another ghost of abandonment. The external threat had tested their resolve, and found it unbreakable. The lumber foreman lunged, a desperate, foolish move. Elias, despite his age, moved with the swiftness of a forest predator. He didn't hurt the man, but he disarmed him, pinning him to the ground with quiet, overwhelming force. The display of controlled power stunned the small crowd into silence. The silence stretched, broken only by the wind whispering through the pines. It was a victory, not of violence, but of unwavering presence and quiet resolve. The standoff didn't end with a bang, but with a slow, uneasy retreat. The townspeople, witnessing Elias's quiet, formidable strength, and perhaps sensing the quiet strength of the bond within the cabin, dispersed, their righteous anger deflated. The foreman, chastened, picked himself up and slunk away. The sheriff, who had observed from a safe distance, nodded curtly at Elias before turning his horse and riding off. The immediate threat had receded, but the scars of that confrontation remained. Not visible wounds, but deeper ones, etched into their shared consciousness. Clara found herself trembling, a delayed reaction to the fear that had gripped her. Elias, sensing her fragility, knelt beside her, his rough hand gently covering hers. "We're safe, Clara," he murmured, his eyes holding hers. "You and Finn, always." His unwavering loyalty had been her shield, his steadfastness her anchor. In that moment, the last vestiges of her self-doubt, Her ingrained belief that she was a burden began to crumble. She was not broken. She was loved. They had made a choice, not just to stay, but to fight for their belonging. This wasn't a heroic triumph in the grand, sweeping sense, but a quiet, deeply personal win. It was the affirmation of their family, their right to exist outside the narrow confines of societal judgment. Elias, in protecting them, had sacrificed any lingering hope of easy acceptance in the town. He chose them over reputation, over convenience, over the path of least resistance. It was a profound act of kindness. Later, as Finn slept soundly between them, their small hands clasped together in the shared warmth of the bed, Clara allowed herself to truly grieve the past, the family who had cast her aside, the world that had tried to define her by her loss. But with the grief came a new, burgeoning sense of healing. The pain was still there. The scars of her past would always remain, but they no longer held her captive. She looked at Elias, his profile softened by sleep, and felt a quiet, profound gratitude. He had given her not pity, but purpose, not charity, but belonging. He had shown her that her value was not in what she could do, but in who she was, in the depth of her spirit. The mountain winds still howled some nights, but now they seemed to sing a different tune, a lullaby of resilience and unwavering love. They had built something real, something strong, like the ancient trees surrounding their cabin, their roots holding fast against the wildest storms. Their trust in each other had been tested, and had proven itself to be as unyielding as the granite beneath their feet. Life in the cabin settled once more into a new, deeper rhythm, marked by the echoes of the confrontation but also by an undeniable peace. The town's judgment, while it had not vanished entirely, had lost its power. Elias and Clara no longer sought acceptance. Their validation came from within their own small, self-sufficient family. They had found their sanctuary, not just within the cabin's walls, but in the unwavering trust they placed in each other. Clara continued to grow, not through an external intervention, but through the consistent emotional validation Elias and Finn offered. She found an inner strength she hadn't known existed, a quiet resilience that mirrored the forest around them. She learned to craft small, intricate carvings from wood, her nimble fingers finding a new form of expression, transforming the raw material of Elias's lumber into small, beautiful things. Finn flourished, his small body growing stronger, his laughter ringing through the cabin like chimes. He was a boy filled with boundless curiosity and an unshakable sense of safety. He was living proof of the kindness that had blossomed in their isolated home. Elias, too, had changed. The deep-seated loneliness that had etched itself into his features had softened, replaced by a quiet contentment. He still worked tirelessly, but there was a lighter step to his stride, a warmth in his eyes that had not been there before. Their life was not without its challenges. The winters were harsh, the work relentless, and the memories of past hurts occasionally resurfaced. But now, they faced them together, a united front. The scars remained, a testament to what they had endured, but they were no longer gaping wounds. They were faded etchings, reminders of the journey they had taken, the healing they had found. Their resolution was not a grand, romantic triumph, but a quiet, enduring peace. They had chosen a life of quiet defiance, a life built on mutual respect and profound belonging. Clara no longer felt the shame of her past, nor did she see herself as a burden. She was a woman, whole and strong, loved for who she was, not despite what she lacked. Their story was a testament to the fact that belonging could be found in the most unexpected places, forged from disparate pieces, and that true strength lay not in solitary independence, but in the fierce, unyielding choice to build a life founded on love and mutual kindness. The forest continued its silent watch, a vast green sea stretching to the horizon, and within its depths, a small, warm cabin stood, a beacon of a family found, not broken, but beautifully, profoundly whole.